welcome everybody to our webinar today. You're all very, very welcome. My name is Gareth Dyke. I'm going to be presenting this webinar on behalf of Bentham Science Publishers. It's just past 10:30 here in Budapest. If you're joining us from the Czech Republic or Hungary, welcome to the webinar. If you're joining us from Hungary, Jó napot kívánok, nagyon örülök neked. It is almost time for us to begin our presentation. Just before we do get started, let me just remind you that we do have a chat box that is down on the right hand side of the GoToWebinar control panel. You should be able to see me. You should be able to see my screen. You should be able to hear me. If you can't, do let us know in the chat box and we'll do something to fix that. And as we go through our presentation today, don't hesitate to ask any questions or make any comments as we go through the content. We will have time at the end of our presentation today for questions, comments, and feedback. And as well, you will get a certificate of attendance from this event today, as well as a copy of the recording. So that's all absolutely fantastic. As we get going, I'll also say that we're going to be posting a number of links in the chat as we go through this presentation, giving our participants access to free trials of Bentham Science content. What that means is that if you sign up, or your university or hospital or research institution signs up, you will get a number of months free access to all of our 126 journals and more than 1,300 ebooks and other content, which is better than nothing. I think you'll admit it's well worth signing up for a trial if that is the kind of thing that you are interested in learning about. So we will get started with our presentation today. I'm just going to quickly check that you can see my screen, and you can. Don't forget that you can put into the chat box any questions that you may have as we go through our webinar event today, as we begin talking about how you can respond and communicate effectively with editors and reviewers over the publication cycle. Let's get going. Let's begin our presentation. You should all, various stages probably of your publication journey, your writing and publishing journey, be familiar in some form or another with this academic publishing cycle. I like to call it the hamster wheel of academic publishing, because all of us, all academics around the world, go around and around and around this cycle all of the time. We have ideas. We have to get funding for those ideas. We then have to collect data to test or disprove the ideas, the hypotheses, the concepts that we come up with as researchers, the knowledge gaps that we develop, the things that we think about developing ideas, research questions. Data collection, very important. And then, of course, we get to the point where we're ready to start thinking about writing up the work for publication. And we always like to say that that should start with journal selection. Bentham Science. It should start with journal selection. You really should be thinking about where you're going to publish those great ideas, that great research, that fantastic data that you've collected before you begin the writing process. Lots of academics do it the other way around, of course. Maybe you've done in the past. They sit down, they write up a paper, then they think, where am I going to get this paper published? And that really is not, it's not the most effective way round. If you have a journal target in mind, maybe 1 or 2 journals, but ideally a journal target in mind before you begin the writing process, you will be able to answer many of the questions that researchers have about the writing and publishing process. What goes into each section? How much information should I include? What should my figures and figure captions look like? And so on. So that's stage 3 of the academic publishing cycle, the academic hamster wheel that we go round and around and around. And of course, then paper writing. We're experts at helping researchers with these stages of the process: journal selection, article writing. Of course, English is nobody's first language in an academic context. Academic writing is alien to everybody. But of course, if English is not your native language, then you will probably experience blockers in the publication process as a result of having to write and publish your work in a different language. And of course, that's not fair. Language should not be a blocker to anybody's publication success. There's no difference in the quality of research being done in any country around the world. It's just often people struggle with English language, and we're here to help. As you get into the submission process, we'll talk about that a little bit today, and then peer review and publication, which is the main topic of our presentation today: communication throughout the academic peer review and publication part of the process. But we always like to begin with the academic publishing cycle, and this little letter that I like to show to audiences at the beginning of these kinds of presentations. We've all gotten these back from journals in one form or another. Dear sir, dear madam, many thanks for asking whether we would like to publish your paper. It's good and original, but unfortunately, we're simply not willing to publish it. The trouble is that the good bits were not original and the original bits were not good. It's a rejection letter from an editor after manuscript submission. Very, very difficult to deal with, I know. Nobody likes getting rejected. Of course, it happens often to us as academics. We may get rejected more than maybe any other line of work, perhaps with the exception of sales professionals, grant applications, academic article submissions, lots of rejection. But how you deal with rejection as a researcher is going to define your future career, because if you get all down and depressed and despondent and sad, that's not a good thing. But if you take the comments that you get from your peer reviewers, from your editors in a positive way, improve your paper, go on to the next journal, you will be more successful in your writing and publishing career. And with this in mind, of course, it's very, 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 very important at the beginning of the process to think about who you are communicating with. And we'll talk about the different stages of manuscript submission, peer review, responding to peer review comments in a moment. But I also like to quickly explain that there are several different kinds of editors in the manuscript journey, in the publishing journey. The word editor in English can mean a number of different individuals. And so I put together a handy field guide here on this slide for the different kinds of editors that you will encounter in the process. Some of them, like language editors, you may not directly interact with as an author. They may be people that you pay yourself or your university pays to work on the language in your article. They may be brought in by the journal. You are probably going to spend most of your time as a researcher talking to what we call academic editors, the people who control content, manage the peer review process, and are very often not professional people working for publishing companies. They are academics themselves, often very busy, working at universities, performing a range of different tasks, managing a research group, doing administration, teaching, doing all those things that we do as researchers, as academics, as well as working for a journal. Of course, the bigger journals have professional academic editorial staff, but by far of the 56,000 international academic journals out there, most of them are working with academics. So the way that you communicate with those busy people when dealing with your article submission may make a big difference to the eventual success or otherwise of your submission. So let's keep that in mind when we start to think about writing emails, talking to editors, making submissions to international journals. And as we already mentioned, the first stage of the process is journal selection. What are you going to do initially when targeting a journal for your next paper? And lots of successful academics, as we've already mentioned, they don't start to write until they've decided on a target journal. That makes the process much more effective. Every journal's different. The kind of article that you might write for an individual journal would be different. Letters, rapid communications, review papers, and so on. So talk to people, talk to others, talk to colleagues, talk to other researchers in your university, in your research field. Where are they publishing their research? And you should get into the habit of making pre-submission inquiries to journals. It's done, of course, in bigger, higher impact factor journals because they want to keep their submissions as low as possible versus success rate versus publication rate. But there's nothing stopping you beginning your publication journey with communication directly to editors, asking them, reaching out to them with your abstract, with your article title, would this kind of research, would this idea, would this data, would this result that I've come up with be interesting for your journal? Save yourself valuable time. Journal selection, of course, in preprint servers, pre-submission inquiries, get your work out there so that journals will come to you. And we, of course, do recommend that you make a list of key target journals in your field, aiming high, but choosing appropriately. You're going to get rejected. But if you bounce back, move on and go to the next journal with the key takeaways from that first initial submission, you'll be more successful overall in your publishing journey. So there's no limit to the number of pre-submission inquiry emails that you can send out to editors. Send them your title, send them the key message from your research, you know what that is, and ask them, would this research, would this piece of work be interesting to your authors for submission to your journal? And they will probably say, interesting, but perhaps not this journal, perhaps another journal, another sister journal in our family, or they may say, yes, I'm interested in this submission, please put it into the system at our journal. So pre-submission inquiries as the first stage of communication with journals, very, very important. Write to editors, write to as many as you like, selecting that target journal effectively. And of course, at the end of this event, I'll give you a link to a package of templates that you can download that will help you with all of these different communication steps in the process. So that's the first thing to say. As you communicate with journals, as you begin your publication journey, do consider making pre-submission inquiries, reaching out to journal editors and asking them if they would be interested in considering your new piece of research in their journal. This is before you've started the write-up, getting a target journal in mind, very effective initial step. Here's a screenshot of the email that we're going to give you at the end of this event. You can modify this for your own purposes, and there's a package of templates that I mentioned that we will give you access to help you with all of the different communication steps that I'm talking about in this event today. So beginning with pre-submission inquiries, also do consider preprint servers. If you've got a piece of work completed or partially completed, it's a great idea to put that work onto a preprint server. Research Square, BioArchive, medRxiv, eLife, many options for you depending upon your subject area, or going for a general preprint server, perhaps with a particular publisher that you're interested in using later for that manuscript later in its life cycle. But these are online repositories for academic work, and you put your work there before peer review and online publication, because that way you can get comments from the community that often significantly improve the quality of the study. You get to share your work rapidly with other researchers, and peer review can happen on the preprint server. It can be open and it can be fast. And as another approach to targeting your work to journals, what you find is that if you upload a draft of your next piece of research to, let's say, bioRxiv, you will find that journals will come to you. They'll write to you and they'll say, hey, Dr. Smith, we are very interested in the preprint that you've just posted on bioRxiv. Would you consider submitting that to our journal? So in terms of speeding up the process as a communication step in the life cycle of your next paper, do consider preprint servers as well. So we've talked so far about pre-submission inquiries and the use of preprint servers as part of that early stage communication with journals. You may have concerns about preprint servers. Don't worry, we'll give you a comprehensive guide to preprint servers as well in our follow-up from this webinar event. People worry about copyright. That's not an issue because preprint servers stamp your article with a document object identifier number. So actually you're safer and less likely to get ripped off, less likely for your data, your ideas to get stolen by somebody else if you do use a preprint server rather than not using a preprint server. And all of your work, all of your content up there on the preprint server is also protected by what's called a Creative Commons license. We don't have time to talk about these in detail in this presentation, but this is an open access license that is on your work that protects it as well from reuse by anybody else. Because if somebody does reuse a figure or some information from your CC license protected preprint, they've got to cite that CC license. So generally, preprinting is an absolutely fantastic idea as a way of speeding up the journal submission and communication process. So we've picked a journal, we've communicated with editors, we've talked to them, we've made a pre-submission inquiry, we've managed to successfully line up a journal, maybe we've also pre-printed our work on one of the many open access preprint servers that are out there around the world. Now it's time for your paper to actually be submitted to a journal. You hit that submission button in the preprint server or in the Manuscript Central, Editorial Manager, Open Journal Systems, Bentham Science manuscript processing system that your publisher is using. It then goes to a desk editor at the journal for that next decision. And of course, remember that field guide to editors that we looked at earlier? This is the academic editor, often a busy academic, often somebody with millions of other things to do at their university, hospital, or institution. They are going to be looking at your submission in a process that we call editorial triage. It's just like if you go out on the street and get hit by a bus, you get rushed off to the emergency room and the doctors there, they triage you, they look at you, they investigate you, they determine the next stage of the treatment process. Just like journal submission, a desk editor, an academic editor is thinking, does this fit with the journal scope? Does this article have a clear message? Is it original? Is it important? Is it true? And is it relevant to our readers? So if you haven't considered these questions in the submission process, in the writing process of your paper, you are making a mistake, because these are the things that academic editors are going to consider in the editorial triage process. You've got to sell your paper to the editor to get it through the triage phase, because high impact factor journals, they want high rejection rates. And so many papers going to big international journals with the higher impact factors get rejected before peer review. So keeping these things in mind, as a submitting author, think about how you're going to sell your work to an editor when you make that initial submission, because we're in the academic cycle, we're in the hamster wheel, we are now at that submission stage. And let's just take a moment to reflect on all of the things that should happen, often don't, but should happen to your paper before you get to the submission stage: journal selection, pre-submission inquiry, pre-printing, reviewer selection, and then journal submission, and selling your work when you make that journal submission in your cover letter. Very, very critical stage. Many authors don't bother with a cover letter. I'm an editor at a journal. I'd say that about 80% of the papers we process, and we process 5 or 6 papers a day, most of them don't have a cover letter, and that is a wasted opportunity. This cover letter gets read by editors. So don't waste the opportunity. Don't write something boring. Please consider this manuscript for publication in your esteemed journal. Tell the editor why they should take your work seriously. So, very important step, often missed by authors, part of the communication process in article submission, because, as I've already mentioned, about 80% of submitting authors don't bother with a cover letter. They put nothing into the system. That is a big mistake. Or if the journal is forcing them to upload a cover letter, and lots of manuscript submission systems require you to upload a cover letter before you can finally click that submit to the editorial office button, they do something like this. They don't want to spend any time on it. They just want to get something into the system so they can make the submission, they can get home, they can go off down the cafe. Dear editor, please find our paper enclosed, which we hope you will find interesting. It's boring. I fell asleep just reading it. Sincerely, Gareth Dyke. It's not worth it. It's better to do a good job. It's not going to take very long, and it will significantly enhance your article's chances of successful publication. Here's one I made up earlier, but it captures the editor's attention. Dear editor, Compound X is a powerful anti-cancer drug. We synthesized it at 99% yield. Reactions catalyzed by A are 60% faster than those catalyzed by B. Our method for synthesis, 50% higher yield. The key message. Why is the work interesting for the journal? Why should the readers of this journal be interested in this paper? Sell your work to editors. It really is a fantastic stage of the publication process, but lots of people don't put the effort and time and energy into. And also, don't forget to put some suggestions for peer reviewers into your cover letter. This is also very, very important, and lots of authors, they don't do this either. Big mistake. Editors will often look at the cover letter looking for reviewer suggestions. Maybe you've not heard this statistic before, but journal editors often have to send up to 10 email requests to different individuals before one person accepts a peer review task. And that means that journals, editors, academic editors, busy researchers managing journals are desperate. They're desperate to get access to peer reviewers for papers. So if you put suggestions into your cover letter, chances are they're going to get utilized by the journal editor. So let's maximize our chances of success. Communication in the process before submission, journal selection, preprint servers, pre-submission inquiries, at the submission step, cover letters, maximizing that chance of success. It's one of the first sections of the paper that an editor is going to read. So why is the topic important? Why are the results significant? What's the key result? What's the advance on previous work? Why are you submitting to this journal? Editors love it. They love it if you talk about their journal. And don't forget to provide reviewer suggestions. And by the way, if you get rejected and end up submitting your paper to another journal, make sure you edit your cover letter, because we also get lots of cover letters to our journal, Historical Biology, that say, thank you for considering our paper for submission to Nature or Science or the Journal of Systematic Paleontology. Authors are so lazy that they don't even bother to re-edit their cover letter before making a new submission. And again, what effect is that going to have on me, the editor? It's not going to make me feel very happy or very proud of my journal. So keep that in mind as well. We'll give you a link to that package of templates. Here's the cover letter template that you can look at later, help you to make your submissions. It contains all of the information that you need to successfully submit an article to a journal and make a effective cover letter with your overall submission. So later I'll give you that link. You can have a look at that and use it in your next article submission. So we've talked about journal selection. We've talked about submission. And now we're going to go on and talk about peer review and publication and how you can communicate effectively at this stage of the academic cycle. So let's imagine that we've made a submission. We've successfully sold the submission to the journal editor with a fantastic cover letter. The paper has now gone out for peer review. And later, you get the comments back. By the way, you don't want to wait too long for comments to come back from peer review. Benchmark 6 to 8 weeks. If you haven't heard back from the editor, write them a polite email, inquire as to the status of those article comments, give them something back, maybe suggesting a few more peer reviewers, and then you get your review comments back. And here we're going to give you a few tips and tricks for responding successfully to reviewer comments from an editor's point of view. Largely, once your paper's been reviewed, the comments and how you respond to those comments will determine your article's final chances of likely acceptance. You're going to get major or minor comments. And if you get major comments or comprehensive comments or substantial revisions required, chances are the paper will then go back to the same peer reviewers, or at least they'll be given the opportunity to look at the paper again for a second time. So keep that in mind when responding to your peer review comments. If you get minor comments, then probably a direct decision will be made by the editor without sending the paper back again to the peer reviewers. But nevertheless, how you respond is important. Be comprehensive. Show your editor that you take the process seriously. Think about the materials that you need for resubmission and persevere at this process. Often, when you get review comments back on a paper that you've written, your first reaction will be, oh, this is awful, like it's going to take me ages to respond to these comments. But actually, you'll find that generally speaking, once you look at the review comments again, after a bit of time has passed, you will find that you will be able to make most, if not all, of the changes requested. Make sure that editors and peer reviewers feel good about your responses. If they feel good, then of course, they're more likely to give your article a positive review. So say things in your response document like, we would like to thank. The reviewer has correctly pointed out, we concur. Thank you for the valuable comments. This valuable insight is much appreciated. These comments significantly enhance the quality of our work. Even if you think the comment is terrible, you can address it. By and large, be polite and positive with your comments back to the journal, because don't forget that the peer reviewers may get to see your comments a second time. And of course, if you write things like, we simply do not have such data, or it's not necessary to change, or this is not actually going to change our conclusions, or I don't think the reviewers understand my point, not going to make them feel good about the change or not that you've made, going to make them more likely to reject your paper. So be positive. Make sure those editors and peer reviewers feel good about your responses. That's a key trick. Managing the process, effectively responding to review comments. There's a method to the madness. You need a document that shows the editor and peer reviewers that you take the process seriously. So it's a great idea to create a Word document, put into that document the comments, and intersperse the reviewer comments with your responses to those comments, perhaps in another color, perhaps in another font, addressing all of the comments, even the small ones. In this example, you can see that reviewer 1 has said, Please use American English spelling throughout. We've responded to that. Thank you for this editorial comment. We've corrected our paper throughout. Making a comprehensive document helps the editor. It also makes him or her feel good about the process. There's an editorial summary there at the top. We would like to thank the 2 peer reviewers who worked on our paper for their considerable efforts and for the time they devoted to our work. We've made almost all the changes requested, and we enclose a revised manuscript. Changes to our paper can be seen in red. Our responses to comments received are summarized below. So the editor can read this, they can see what's been done to the paper. They can see, oh, this author has comprehensively responded. They're being polite, they're being positive. I feel good about this paper. It's more likely to eventually get accepted. So do keep that in mind. And again, as part of the communication process, we will be giving you, in our little packet of documents at the end of this event, we will be giving you access to these templates. So again, you'll get that at the end of the event. You can have a look at that. You can definitely take that on board and use the templates that we provide for these different stages in the communication process when sending back your responses to revision. So here we go again, the old hamster wheel, the old academic publishing cycle. We've talked about journal selection. We've talked about submission. We've talked about managing peer review. Now what happens later in the process once you are dealing with your article? Now, I mentioned what to do if your paper's taking too much time. You should communicate. Don't wait. Communicate with the editor if you have to wait for more than 6 to 8 weeks and you've heard nothing and you know that your paper has been sent out for peer review. Be polite. Give something back to the journal editorial office. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm writing in regard to my article, and give the number at the top of the letter. The editor will struggle often to find articles in their online system. I find myself writing back to authors who write to me to inquire about their paper to ask them what the manuscript number is for their submission, because often it's hard for me to find papers in our online system. We have so many papers in process. Don't wait, communicate. Here's a template that you can use for writing back to your editor if you find that your paper has taken too long in the system. And also, of course, as we talked about a little bit earlier on in our session today, what happens when you get rejected? I know it sucks. You get rejected. It happens a lot before or after peer review. You should be, as we'll talk about in a moment, taking the positives from this experience. An old Irish salesman once told me that rejection is always positive, and it's true. There's always something positive that you can take from a rejection. Indeed, don't get disheartened, don't get despondent. If you get rejected and you feel that that is unfair, which happens often in academic publishing, you are going to write again, communicate to the editor, and make an appeal. What's the worst that can happen? If your paper's been rejected and you feel that the comments underlying that rejection are unfair, the paper's already been rejected. So the worst that can happen is that it stays rejected. It's always very well worth sending an email to the editor and asking for another chance. If you feel that you've been unfairly treated, you feel that you can address the comments or show the editor why the comments are unfair, get back to them and appeal. We'll give you a template for doing this as well at the end of our webinar event. I have several examples from my own career where this happened. We got rejected. We felt that the comments that we received in peer review were harsh, unfair, generally nasty. So we wrote to the editor. We explained our situation. We explained the position. The paper was sent out for review again after it had been rejected. We made an appeal. So be confident, believe in the quality of your work. If you feel you are unfairly treated, talk, communicate to the editor. Now, Just a few notes, just a few things in the communication with journals that you should not do, This happens quite often, actually. Here's a real email that I did get at the journal that I am an editor working with. It's a real email. Hello, thank you for reviewing my manuscript. I have some minor modifications and I've added 2 authors. They've also contributed to my manuscript. This is not okay in academic publishing. When you make a submission to a journal, you declare to that journal that all of the authors are correct, all of the authors have contributed, and all of the authors are aware of the submission. Sending a paper to a journal requires all authors to know about and support the submission. Authors try to do this. Of course, they know that their paper is likely to be accepted, and so they start sticking extra authors onto the article. It happens quite often. But trying to add authors after the paper's been accepted or while the paper is in the submission system causes alarm at the editorial office and is very difficult actually to deal with. Doing this, adding authors, will probably lead to your paper getting rejected. At least, the least that will happen is that the journal will start to investigate the situation. You'll have to sign lots of paperwork. Journals generally hate dealing with these situations. So as a communication step in the process, something to avoid. But I would say really one of the most important things that you can do to aid communication across the scholarly publishing industry, across the article submission process, is get yourself an ORCID ID. ORCID is a not-for-profit organization connecting research and researchers. Maybe you've seen these little green IDs on the top of papers. You can get a persistent digital identifier that distinguishes you from every other researcher. And this is actually quite important to journals and will be important to you as you develop and build your career. Because at the end of the day, what this means is that you sign up on ORCID, it will create for you your academic CV by feeding all of the information online, Web of Science, Clarivate, Publons, reviewer credits, back into a profile that you can use to share with other researchers. So it's a fantastic way of promoting yourself, a great way to build your academic CV, and also necessary when you make those submissions to international journals. So do have a think about that as well as part of the communication process. My most important point with this training today is that communication is key in the manuscript submission, processing, and peer review process. Where's my paper? I've waited 2 months. Looking forward to an immediate reply is a real example of an email. It's not a good email to send to an editor. Dear editor, I am writing to ask if I can do something to help speed up my recent submission to your journal. Can I make some suggestions for additional peer reviewers? Friendly, positive, giving something back to that busy academic editor at the university struggling with lots of other tasks. Your communication, how you talk to editors, how you deal with peer review will significantly impact on your article's chances of eventual acceptance. What we're about at Bentham Science Publishers is helping you to maximize your success. We're here to help you with training, with a great series of journals as well, and I'm going to give you in a minute the link to our journal free trial page so you can have a look at that. But do keep in mind and do listen back and do share this presentation with friends, colleagues, family members, pets, anyone you like, because we are here to help you maximize your success. And if there are any questions, you can just type them in the chat box. We are ready to help. Do get in touch with us. Do ask us anything at any time, because we've talked today about the stages of the publishing cycle. And we've talked today about communication in the publishing cycle, both good and bad. And if you'd like more information about Bentham, you can find it on these social media channels. We've got quite a lot. You can follow us on YouTube, get in touch with us in a number of different ways. Do take a screenshot of this particular page. Do get in touch. Do sign up, because we do a monthly webinar event. We've got lots of other training content. We've got blogs online. We've got videos online. We've got a huge amount of content on our YouTube channel, all of it geared towards helping researchers achieve their potential. If you're listening to this and you'd like to learn more about the kinds of journals that we publish, maybe sign up your institution for a free trial, then do get in touch with Franz Lettenstrom, the sales director at Bentham Science Publishers. And his email there, franz@benthamscience.net, could not be easier to remember. And so with that, I will say, my name is Gareth Dyke. I am going to stop sharing my screen in order that I can now get into the chat box and share with you some fantastic links to help you if you need any more information. And don't forget that we're here. If you'd like to give us any feedback or ask us any questions, now is the chance to do that. Please put your questions into the chat box. We've got some time left over for questions. If you have any questions or indeed any comments or any feedback, I'd absolutely love to get those questions. I'm just going to quickly give you a link, 2 links in fact. The first of those is coming now in the chat box. I hope you can see it. It is a link to the free templates that I mentioned in the webinar presentation. Okay, so if you go to that link, you'll be able to download a compressed folder that contains a large number of Word documents that you can use in the future in your communication with editors and with peer reviewers. And the second link that I've pasted there for you is a link to a PDF document that will give you the information that you need if you would like to sign up your institution for a free 3-month trial. I got that the right way around this time. A free 3-month trial of Bentham Science content. Let me just check the chat box one more time in case there are any questions or any comments coming in. I can see attendees have joined us today from across the world, with emphasis, of course, on the Czech Republic and Hungary. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining. You can, of course, connect with me. I'm in Budapest. If you're listening to this from Hungary or the Czech Republic and you'd like to meet in person, do get in touch. Do drop Franz an email and we will be able to help. I see there are some questions in the chat box. David Horvat is asking, is it possible to send us the presentation? Absolutely. We will send you a recording, David. We'll also send you a PDF of the slides that we used in this presentation. Today we have a question as well. If we get rejected and because of that we update our paper, for example, we enlarge our sample size, correct our arguments and ask and add other authors, can we then apply again? Absolutely. Yes, it's always a good idea if you get rejected from a journal, before you make a resubmission with a revised version of that piece of research, get in touch with the journal editor, okay? Make sure you write to the journal editor before you make that resubmission, because you don't want to get quickly rejected again. You don't want to take a lot of time reformatting a paper. So if you are thinking of making a resubmission based on a previously rejected article to the same journal, just take a moment to write to the editor and check that that's going to be okay with them. That's a great question. Thank you very much. Thank you for the comments, Jana. Very much appreciated. Another colleague, also called Jana, is asking, 6 times I received an answer. We have a lot of articles. This article is not suitable to the scope of the journal special issue. How to persuade an editor to start the reviewing process? Well, in this particular situation, if the editor has come back to you, Jana, and has said that the article is not suitable to the scope of the journal, then I'm afraid my best advice would be to look for another journal. And we can help with that as well. We're able to provide you with completely impartial advice on journal selection. So do get in touch with us if you need help with that. But you don't want to flog a dead horse, as we say in English. You don't want to keep trying to get your paper published in a journal when the editor has already told you that it's outside the scope. So please make sure to get in touch and we can help you with that. Thanks, David. I was told a month ago, says Irene, that the editor that it would still take 2 weeks for my article to be revised, and it has still not come back to my attention. Should I write to the editor? I would, yeah. If they've told you a month ago that it would take 2 weeks, I think a polite email is very much in order at this point. So yes, make sure you keep it polite and make sure you give the editor the manuscript number at the top of your email so that they can easily find it. But yes, I think, Irene, it's a good idea now to go back to the journal and just ask them politely for an update. Don't say, hey, you told me a month ago that you'd be back to me in 2 weeks. That's a bit pushy. Just be polite. Just say, I'm writing again to inquire about the status of my manuscript. Maybe I can give you some more peer review suggestions. Maybe I can do something to help speed up, to expedite the process. Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, great questions, everyone. Fantastic. Don't forget to click on the links in the chat to download our folder of free templates, and also click on the link which will give you access to a free 3-month trial of Bentham content. Thank you everybody for listening to our event today. My name is Gareth Dyke and this has been a Bentham Science Publishers free webinar event, and you're all very welcome and have a fantastic day ahead. Best wishes and talk to you all soon.